Welcome back, everybody. Again, we appreciate you being with us today. It's March 25th, Thursday, refresh session number 2 for this week. I'm Pastor Steve Green. Yesterday, we spoke about an amazing New Testament truth. We have been reconciled to God, and therefore we now need to be reconciled to God. That's in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Let's see what this looks like as we expand upon it. We'll look both in Galatians and in 2 Corinthians 5 and 6, but let's start in Galatians. In chapter 2 and verse 20, Paul says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. So just like we have been reconciled to God, therefore we need to be. Paul here is explaining that Jesus loved us and gave himself for us. And the necessary relational response to that is now we love him and give ourselves to him. We have been reconciled by his death and resurrection, and now we give ourselves to him. We love him and give ourselves to him, just as he did for us. And in doing that, we are now being reconciled to him. He says, do not set aside the grace of God. The grace of God flows to us as we trust, yield, and surrender to the words of Jesus, to a person and not to a law. Not setting aside the grace of God means we're allowing Christ to live in us. Allowing Christ to live in us is the means by which we do not set aside the grace of God. That's what a key statement. Allowing Christ to live in us as our Lord is the means by which we do not set aside the grace of God. By allowing him to direct me, I am engaging the grace of God. Very similarly, in 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 15, he died for us and he rose again for us, and therefore Paul says that those who live should no longer live for themselves but for him. Because he died for us, we need to now live for him. We need to give ourselves to him. Very same thought as in Galatians. In chapter 6 and verse 1 of 2 Corinthians, he says, we then as workers together with him also plead with you not to receive the grace of God in vain. Just parallel thoughts in the book of Galatians and the book of 2 Corinthians. So not receiving the grace of God in vain means we no longer live for ourselves, but we now live for him. Just as we read before, that allowing Christ to live in us is the means by which we do not set aside the grace of God. Living not for ourselves, but for him is the means by which we do not receive the grace of God in vain. It's taking the step of faith to follow him is what engages God's grace, his power in our lives.